Carl, you said that entrepreneurs are too valuable a natural resource to be subjected to a potpourri of unsubstantiated aphorisms dressed up as good business advice. Carl, let's start there.
It's a great place to start. In a sense, the reason I wrote this book was having run the Kauffman Foundation for 10 years and having seen the potpourri of books and advice and courses that people have laid in front of people who would be entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, I just became so frustrated that these books basically pass along mythology. And I think what marked my 10 years at Kauffman, as you said in the introduction, I was really focused on trying to get to the empirics of what happens, okay? So before we began our research, I'm happy to say we do this now. We count this in the government. But if you can imagine, in 2002, when I went to Kauffman, there was no federal statistic that told us how many new businesses were being started in the United States. And as your introduction properly said, it's these new businesses that fire up or regenerate or refresh, whatever way you want to look at it, our economy. And to imagine that economists had no interest in this, not enough to have pushed the government measuring startups, seemed, difficult for me to comprehend. And in a sense, what I saw was, it's business professors who tell stories, but they don't have a systematic view that would be helpful to somebody who's thinking about starting a business. There's a lot of aspiration out there, certainly now with the hype about entrepreneurs. People think, oh, this is what I want to do. And in a sense, what I'm trying to do in the book is basically say, look, before you take that first step, understand how this process works.
Yeah.
There's a magic cookbook, okay? This is real statistical facts. One of the very first things you might point out is, colleges are loaded up with this view that we're going to teach every graduate and that the idealized entrepreneur is 21. But in truth, the average entrepreneur in the United States starts his or her first business when they're 39.
Yeah, you burst the bubble a bit, not a bit, completely on the idea that it's usually, a 19-year-old kid who dropped out of Harvard who started something in his dorm room. And in fact, that's by far the exception rather than the rule. I mean, most of the entrepreneurs you point out are middle-aged and they've been in businesses, they've worked for other people, they've got a lot of scars on their back before they launch their own venture, and we have and I'm glad it is romanticized because it does shine a spotlight on entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everybody is Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. It's what you call in the book everyman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a book for every man entrepreneur in the sense that, almost 95% of people who start businesses are what a famous economist once called replicative. They're copycat entrepreneurs, right? So the notion that you're going to be Mark Zuckerberg, there are Mark Zuckerbergs happen. We have a special word for it. We now call them unicorns. Years ago, we used to call them gazelles, okay? So I don't know which animal is appropriate, but the fact is that's a tiny, tiny fraction. And the sort of structure of your career, if you're like a 19-year-old in college, that you're going to learn how to be an entrepreneur, you're going to take a major in that. Becoming an entrepreneur is like an occupation, like becoming a dentist or an accountant. It's just so unreal. Going back to the point you made earlier, I wrote the book to disturb this, mostly to save people from wasting a huge amount of time pursuing a fantasy that we don't actually have sketched out for everybody in kind of a cookbook way.
Well, I think you were part of the work that developed the knowledge that where the really great jobs come from. And you mentioned gazelles, and now we call them unicorns. But gazelles are basically those high growth, tend to be technology-oriented companies, but it doesn't have to be technology. But those growth companies that in the old days went public were the gazelles, and that's where the action is in terms of high-paying jobs. And then now we have the unicorns, and I guess the only basic difference there is they don't go public anymore because of the state of the public markets.
Yeah, there are a couple of issues surrounding that are kind of interesting. One is that a lot of these gazelles or unicorns don't, in the end, create that many jobs. if you really think about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was the,
No, no. I mean, that's not the companies that do it. It's the folks who actually start, a franchise. It comes to mind, there's a fellow in the book called Bob Carlucci.
mm-hmm,
And, he has a fantastic story. His father died. He had to drop out of college. He was at the New England Conservatory. He was going to become a musician. He got a part-time job in a pool room, and he bought 2 cigarette vending machines. His full-time job, he was working night shifts at General Electric up in around Boston, because he's supporting his mother and 3 younger brothers. But it's those 2 vending machines that sort of got him started. And the next thing you know, he tried to get a franchise, Taco Bell in Boston. People said tacos. They didn't.
Takeos, yeah.
Taco was not eaten in Boston. People sort of forget this, and Bob's not that old. But he finally got Taco Bell to give him a franchise in Maryland. And long story short, he now employs 16,000 people. So the issue is with some of the high-tech companies, the core at Google that really manages the search engine is something on the order of 35 to 60 people. So if you strip away everything else, that's the core of Google. Facebook doesn't employ that many people. So there is this kind of shift in the weather. Entrepreneurs are still really vital to the creation of new businesses, but it's not necessarily the gazelles. We estimated at Kaufman, first time these estimates were ever done, Bill, if you can imagine this, that about 80 to 85% of all the new jobs in the United States are created in firms less than 5 years old. That's how important they are to job creation.
Okay, I think that was the statistic I was thinking about. And you also point out that we talk about franchises, roughly 45% of the new businesses created every year are franchises.
Yeah, yeah. And if today we were just translating ourselves to you name the business school, right? You won't find a course on franchising because professors think about franchisees. They can't bring themselves to believe that they're entrepreneurs, right? But let me say, you or I go out tomorrow, we're lucky enough to get a Chick-fil-A franchise, right? You'll know what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. You've left your job. You've taken loans to buy the franchise. You got the mortgage on the building. You've dealt with a contractor. You know what the city requires in terms of drainage for your parking lot, right? You've become an entrepreneur. And one of the most amazing things about this is exactly Bob Carlucci's story. He starts with 1 franchise, and then the next thing you know, he had 60 restaurants with 16,000 employees. And part of that is the same reason that we watch success go up with age. Once he ran 1 franchise, he sort of knew what the ropes were, right? And then adding the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 16th were much easier. He was a scale entrepreneur, if you will.
Well, I think when I ran Allied Capital, when I was CEO of Allied Capital, we owned several franchisors, Meineke and some building cleaning franchisors, and also helped finance the franchisees. And yeah, that's right. I mean, we created, hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs through these franchisee operations. And I think you're right. They're lying awake at 2 a.m. worrying about stuff the same way every Silicon Valley entrepreneur is worrying about stuff. I mean, taking responsibility for an enterprise, large or small, is a very big deal.